Start sharing my screen. Make sure everybody can see here. Perfect. Can everybody see that? Awesome. So I need to go back. So really this is going to be about writing verses, and we're going to go through some basics, and then also towards the end we'll also work together to sort of explore how you can start thinking about writing verses. So there are some common song sections, and each song section really has a different role that it plays. So each song section really does its own sort of job to set up the other sections. So those are, of course, verses, which we'll talk about. Verses set up the situation. They establish the who, when, and the where, and sometimes the what. Also, the other part of a song, of course, people know as the chorus, which is usually the main emotional idea of the song. That really establishes the why and really what the song is about at its core. And we'll talk about choruses actually next month in our workshop. So if you learn about verses this time in February, we'll be learning about choruses. For the third common section, a bridge is really something that takes us somewhere new. So literally, a bridge sort of helps us cross, whatever we're trying to get to, and it expands on the idea that's in your song. So I see people taking notes and things. So I'll give you just a couple more seconds to write those down. So what we're really going to focus on tonight, though, is what really makes for a good verse. So let's talk about what a verse does. So a verse, and a lot of times people, I've heard different people say like the chorus is the most important part of the song because that's what people remember. That's sort of what people sing along to. That's actually very true, but I think your verses actually make your chorus mean more. So your chorus, or I mean your verse, is really a developmental part of a song. So what it does is it establishes the context of why the chorus matters. It also introduces us to the characters in the song. And what I mean by characters is who is speaking, who is it the singer's perspective? Is it the singer singing about someone else? Or what is the what is the sort of point of view of the song? So it introduces us to who sang it, who sang what, and who they're saying it to. Also, what a verse does is it puts us into a setting. So it can be sort of the scene that your chorus is taking place in, and it's really setting the stage of what the song is all about. And it also can establish a place and time. And what place and time can mean is like past, present, future, like now, later, in the past, those types of things. So it can help establish that. Also, with verses, verses have more physical descriptive language than they do emotional language most of the time. So verses are usually a little bit more concrete than abstract. And your chorus is probably going to be more abstract and talking about emotions. And your verse will be that more concrete sort of language. The other thing that verses do when we're talking about melody is your verse helps you establish rhythmic and melodic motifs. So we talk a lot about in our workshops talking about contrast and how to sort of contrast in your songs and create contrast. But if we don't have your verse establishing a pattern or establishing a motif, you don't necessarily know how to make your chorus contrast. So it actually helps us establish sort of home base for the melody in your song. And what's really cool about verses is they can change the meaning of a chorus. So it can actually make a chorus mean more as you come around each time. So does anybody else have any sort of high level thoughts of what a verse does or what a verse is? And you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself as well.
I just like how you highlight the fact that the verse can change the meaning of the chorus. Think back to what you said before about it makes it gain more weight as you every time you come back through it, and verses can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Pat Patterson's book, Writing Better Lyrics, he talks about boxes, and your box gets bigger as your verses go on to make your chorus mean more. So you can use that to recolor it. So let's explore some verse content and some tips on how to really develop your verses. So one thing that I've been doing is listening to a lot of popular music that I like. And what I found is there's sort of this grid that I created that sort of helps me as I'm writing to think about what am I putting into my verses. So across the top, I have what, who, where, and when. So those are usually things that a verse will try to establish in your song. And a lot of times the things that are happening in a song is someone is doing something, something is happening either to or around someone, and then the people in the songs are usually feeling something. So you can sort of use this grid to help yourself to start thinking about how do you develop your verse content. So Tara, not to put you on the spot, but you said you wrote a chorus and you don't necessarily know where to take the verse. Are you okay sharing what the chorus might be about on a high level or
Sure. Um, so the chorus is kind of like, even though you get older and you move into the future, you still carry all your past and your history and your memories with you into the present and the future. That's a real high level.
okay. So you said sort of as you get older, you sort of take all of this time with you, kind of a idea.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder where time went and how you still keep all these memories with you. And then the verse, I have got two verses right before the chorus. And funny enough, it's setting the scene. But I think in the last meeting you had, you said something that really stood out to me was try not to make your verses say the exact same thing. And so I think my verses are kind of doing that where they're not different enough.
Got it. So and in this song you said you have two verses that are back to back. So it's one verse leading into a verse and then to your chorus.
Yep, I've got two verses and a chorus.
Okay. So one of the things that you can do is take an inventory of what you already have in those verses. So what is happening, what is the feeling and what is someone doing, and then you can look at like who's doing it, who's it happening to, or who is feeling it, where is all this happening, and when is it happening. And in order to make your verse 2 mean something different than verse 1, you advance one of these things. So if your character stays the same, you can change either what they're doing, what's happening to them, or what they're feeling, or you could change where they are, or when that is happening. So, and when we say when, it doesn't have to be like a major, like in the future, right? Like 1 minute from now is in the future. So you could also think of like now what. So whatever your first verse is saying, your second verse would be like the expansion of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
And then the other thing is in Pat Patterson's book, and sort of what I remember too, is he says that paint runs down. So once you establish who, when, and where and what's happening, you don't have to keep establishing that. So you're free once you have your first verse, sort of establishing that. Your second verse can go to more feeling language and sort of talk about like, okay, we know what's happening. What is this character feeling about it? And since we've already heard the setting that's been established, you don't have to keep telling us that because that detail runs down, which I think might be helpful for that as well. Any questions or thoughts on that? So I think with this, like I said, this is kind of just a grid that I created for myself to look at like, okay, who is the song about? Like, what are they doing? What's happening to them? What are they feeling? And I can start to write out, not in sort of song structure, but I can sort of create an outline to sort of establish how I'm going to write the song. And I think as you listen to songs that you like, I think you will find that it's fun to sort of dissect them and say like, who's it happening to? Who's saying it? Where's it happening? What's the time frame? All of those things. And I think you'll find that either a couple or one of these things will advance into the next verses and sort of set up the chorus. So verses, again, usually start with more concrete physical imagery words or metaphors that imply imagery words. So some, like a pop song could say like, I'm building walls around my heart, right? That has imagery in it because it says building walls. So the way I think of lines are physical lines are things that we can experience with our senses, which means can you see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, smell it, those types of things. Whereas emotional lines are lines that you can't necessarily experience through your senses. So it's more like a feeling or it's something that's happening inside the characters. So verses usually will establish concrete physical imagery, and then it will end with the emotions that surround the concrete parts. And then also verses are very conversational. So a lot of times as songwriters, we try to write stuff that's very clever and maybe poetic. You know, we start to get a little bit, I don't know, we sometimes try to say too much when we're writing, so it becomes really flowery and not really something that you'd say in your everyday language. So one thing that you can do is to check to make sure that you're doing that is to read your songs out loud and read them as if you were saying them to like a friend. You know, if you do speak like you're Shakespeare, then that's cool, but most people don't talk like that. So that's something to sort of think about as you're writing. So let's start talking about some hit verses and looking at how this all fits in together. So we're going to do a couple things. We're going to read lyrics first, and then we're going to listen and sort of see how they established the who, when, the where, and the what. And I tried to pull some big artists and big songwriters that most people would know. So the first song that we'll kind of take a look at is it's written by Adele and Dan Wilson, which was a major hit, Someone Like You. And for everybody, if you didn't know, Dan Wilson is actually from Minnesota. He's from Minneapolis. So definitely an Adele Minnesota connection, which I think is cool. So Doyle, I'm going to put you on the spot. Read these lyrics. I mean, you may know the melody, but read these as if you're just talking to us.
I heard that you settled down, that you found a girl and you're married now. I heard you kind of get it, Bill.
Yes.
I start getting into the rhythm of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, those lyrics, if someone just said that and you didn't necessarily know the song, that doesn't sound sing-songy. It doesn't sound, you know, like it was written. It just sounds like, hey, I heard you settled down and you found a girl and you're married now. Like somebody would say that, which I think is very important as you're writing verses. And it says, I heard that your dreams came true. Guess she gave you things I didn't give to you. Old friend, why are you so shy? ain't like you to hold back or hide from the light. So what's cool about this is when you talk about like the whole concrete versus abstract too, I heard that you settled or that you're settled down. That's a pretty concrete, I heard something, somebody said it. You found a girl and you're married now. That's pretty concrete. And then I heard that your dreams came true. That's kind of a mix to me of concrete and abstract. But then it starts talking about things that you can't necessarily experience. It talks about, she gave you things I didn't give to you. Old friend, why are you so shy? It's not like you to hold back and hide from the light. So as you can see, it started with concrete and progressively got more emotional. So what the emotional or what the concrete language does is it really helps you to give context to the emotion. So like, let's pretend somebody came in this meeting and is like, I'm really mad. I'm so mad. I can't stand it. What would be the first thing that you would ask that person? Why? But if someone came in and said, my car just broke down, someone stole my iPad, I just lost my job, and I have a really bad rash, somebody would be saying basically like, well, that sucks. Like, how do you feel about that? So like, think about songs as a conversation with your listener, because songs are really telling stories. They're like a 3-minute storytelling. And we want to make sure that your listener is experiencing it the way that you want them to experience it. So let's, before we listen to some of these, let's go to the next song that I've pulled out. So the next song is Cardigan by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. This one has a lot of external concrete language in the beginning and then goes to sort of more abstract thoughts as well. So these lyrics are vintage tea, brand new phone, high heels on cobblestones. When you're young, they assume you know nothing. So it's external, internal. Sequin smile, black lipstick, sensual politics. When you're young, they assume you know nothing. So again, external, internal. So it's concrete, emotion. When it goes to the next section of the song, which is kind of a pre-chorus / chorus, it also has images in it, but it starts to talk about her emotion. So it says, but I knew you dancing in your Levi's, drunk under a streetlight. I knew you, hand under my sweatshirt, baby, kiss it better. And when I feel like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite. So it's interesting to see how it goes external to internal. So let's go back to Adele and let's listen to how that, when you hear it as the song itself, how does just pay attention to how it sounds when or I should say, pay attention to how the lyrics or how the rhythm of the lyrics establishes the melodic motif. If I can click on it here. If it'll let me. Maybe I have to copy this. Sorry, guys. I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec. There we go. So the next section, it goes into like a pre-chorus, but as you can see, even the way that she sings it almost has it almost has sort of a conversational flow to it as well. The melody actually flows the way that you would really pronounce those words. And I think that's something to be careful of as you are writing, is make sure that you are really keeping the stresses on the right words and making sure you're keeping the natural shape of the speech and the melody that sort of naturally occurs within the language. So the next song we'll listen to is the Taylor Swift one. So I'll go back here and share the screen once again. So again, the way that she's phrasing is keeping the natural shape of the language. Any other observations on those two songs and kind of the verses, or anything that you heard that we haven't talked about in this? Mike?
I like the Adele song where there's like little bursts of 3 syllables, which were powerful as far as melodically.
Sure. Definitely. I think one of the things that we sometimes forget as we're writing songs is the importance of melody. I think melody is what holds your song together. And I think melody is what actually makes your listeners remember your song more so than the lyrics do. If you think back to songs that you enjoy, or if you're trying to like reminisce with someone like, oh, what is that song? Many times you will hum how it went more so than what the words were. And I don't know how many of you have songs that you listen to and you couldn't recite a single lyric, but you can hum along to the whole thing. Like I just noticed that the other day with the song I was listening to. I just had my my phone on like shuffle when I was taking a shower, and a song came up from the 80s that I like, and I couldn't even tell you. It was like by Foreigner or somebody like that. But I know none of the words, but I can tell you how the song goes and like how the sections change. So I think as you're writing verses, your verse melody is just as important as your chorus melody. And I think that's something that we miss sometimes as writers. When I was, in the past, when I was writing songs, I always thought, well, I can just kind of rush through the verses because the chorus is what's going to carry my song. But now I really don't. I don't have that thought. I think the verse is your first chance to really hook your listener. Tara says you can really hear how, Tara says that how Taylor Swift took a certain number of syllables and then stuck with it for the verses. Yes. So she had a motif and she really stuck with that motif and really stuck to that basically exactly. Beth, you said you couldn't pick out the melody quite as much in the Taylor Swift song. I think if you listen to it a little bit more, you might be able to find where it repeats. There's quite a bit of repetition in there. So let's go back to my presentation, if I can get that up. I should have 2 monitors so I can do this easily, but here we go. So the next song that we'll talk about is Eleanor Rigby. And I know that some people in here are big fans of the Beatles and John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So looking at Eleanor Rigby, obviously these lyrics in a verse, I mean, this is such an iconic song that it's a little bit hard to even separate from like the natural language, but some people this may be new to, but looking at the lyrics of this, it's like Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. They actually sing it as been. Lives in a dream. So here, again, you have external, which is a person, which you can experience through your senses. Picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. That's also very concrete, and that gives us an image. Lives in a dream. There's your abstract. So regardless of genre, regardless of time period, regardless of like type of song, a lot of these concepts are happening right under your nose, and you don't even necessarily know what's happening. And I think that's the magic of songcraft is, did these writers think about this? Maybe, maybe not, but you can, and you can use the tools that work to really sort of do it on purpose until you do it by accident. So I think as you're thinking about how you're writing your verses, think about what is concrete and what is abstract. So the second half of the verse is waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. That's like, that line to me, what do you guys think that? I think that means makeup. But I don't, but if you want to go the serial killer route, she has a face in a jar by the door. And who's it for? You know? But for those of you, what do you think that line means? That was kind of a serious question. To me, I think it's makeup. I think she puts on a face.
I always thought it was because she kept a smile there when she opened the door.
Yep. I think that's right, Greg. I think she's not really, she's putting on an act for somebody and she doesn't really know who it's for.
I love the concrete of jar by the door. I mean, just the thinking of a jar by the door. Why is the jar by the door? It's really interesting language.
Right. And again, a lot of these lines are not very poetic when you think about them. Whoops. These lines are very much, just everyday language, which I think makes them powerful. The other thing, as some of you who've been coming to the workshops, we've talked a lot about prosody. Prosody is where the meaning of your lyric matches the structure of the song and the music. What's interesting about this, I was thinking about this the other day as I was reviewing this, is like, picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Picking rice up would be a very long, repetitive process. And look at what the longest line in the verse is. I thought that was an interesting subconscious prosody where, that line is longer than the other ones. And that's kind of gives you that sense of that process, which is interesting about wearing a face that she keeps in a jar by the door. That may mean that takes some effort to me. And that might be establishing that. So it's kind of like short, long, short, short, long, short for the lines. Any other thoughts that anybody can notice in these lyrics? Cool.
The item of jar by the door is almost kind of a sad aspect that she's waiting for someone.
Oh, sure. That's a cool perspective too. Yeah.
Because it's a sad song in a way. If you really, overall, it's about lonely people in a way.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the song itself says, "Look at all the lonely people," and the first verse talks about Eleanor Rigby, and then we'll talk about how it advances into the future, and how the song advances from the first verse content to the second verse content. But one of the things that you'll notice as you study sort of commercial songs and songs that are what we would consider like hit songs, are that verses usually have either 4 or 6 lines. So they're usually pretty balanced. Your number of lines can keep your section balanced. And one of the tricks, if you want your song, if your song is about something that's unbalanced, you would change either the rhythm or the length or the number of those lines to add that prosody. But there's really no hard or fast rules. But in a lot of songs, you'll find that a lot have 4 to 6 lines in their verses. So if we go back to Eleanor Rigby, there's 6 lines. If we go back to Taylor Swift, there's 6 lines. There's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These are just the way it shows up. It's showing up as 2. And then there's actually 6 in Someone Like You as well. So you'll find that when you're writing, you really only need 4 or 6 lines to have an effective verse. The other thing we've already talked about is verses really have everyday language that you may use with one of your friends. The emotion comes from how those words set the scene and explain what should be felt about it or what's being felt about it. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is rhyme scheme. So we'll talk about some common rhyme schemes, and then we'll also look at some real life examples of rhyme schemes as well. So first thing is, what is a rhyme scheme? So a rhyme scheme is usually the pattern of rhymes at the end of lines within a section. So a lot of times you'll like a Mary had a little lamb, fleece was white as snow, everywhere that Mary went, lamb was sure to go. That's an XA rhyme scheme. The X's are lines that don't rhyme, and then the lines that rhyme are the second and fourth line. So if we look at the songs we just studied and what we just listened to on some of them, Someone Like You was an AABBCC rhyme scheme, where it was done in couplets or lines or two lines together that rhyme. And each of the lines had a different sound at the end of those lines. Cardigan was AABCCB. So you had two lines rhyme, and then there was a third line that didn't rhyme, two lines that rhyme, and then the sixth line actually rhymes with the third. Eleanor Rigby was starting lines that didn't rhyme with anything, and then it was two lines that rhymed, and then two other lines that rhymed with a different sound. So those are real life examples. And I think one of the ways that you can start to learn different rhyme schemes is to listen to songs that you like and write down, where are they rhyming? Like, what lines are they rhyming on? What does that pattern look like? And how can you sort of use that pattern in your own writing? So common verse rhyme schemes, and there's a lot of letters on this. I know it looks kind of complicated, but if there are four lines, you could have all four lines rhyme, which would be AAA. You could have none of the lines rhyme, which would be all X's. You could have AABB. You could have ABAB. You could have XAXA, XXAA, or any combination in between. And similar to six-line rhyme schemes as well. And we'll probably upload, for members, we'll probably upload this presentation to the resources page on the MAS website. So you don't have to necessarily write all these down super fast. But a lot of times when we write, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know, there's a reason why some of these rhyme schemes work, and there's a reason why a lot of songs use them. And that's because a lot of people are used to how that structure works. And copying rhyme schemes is not plagiarism, because you're only taking the structure. You're not copying the melody and the lyrics of songs. So one of the great ways to start teaching yourself is to take a song that you really like and dissect it like this. Write down the rhyme scheme, like write down how many lines are there. Are they short lines? Are they long lines? What's the rhythm like? What is all of that? And then try to write something similar that would come out different, and no one would even know what song you were actually looking at from the very beginning. So now we've talked about sort of establishing verses and sort of what does that. Let's talk about, how do you then write a second verse? You know, a lot of times they say it's the curse of the second verse because people just don't know what to write. They just don't know, where do we go now? Like, what do we do? And one of the number one reasons that you run out of, well, there's a couple reasons. So one of the reasons why you run into that second verse curse is, one of them is you said everything that you have to say in your first verse. You sort of like told us the punchline right from the beginning. So you told us the entire story right away, so there's nowhere to go. The other thing is maybe your idea isn't worthy of a full song. If you can't pull enough content from an idea, it may not be strong enough to be a song on its own. Maybe you came up with a part of a song that has a bigger meaning. So sometimes you have to stop and think of how excuse me, how is my content doing that? So second verse brings us back to the same chart that I had shown before. So if you have established a who, when, where, and a what in your first song sections, what you can do to advance it is advance one of these things. So what do we mean by advancing? So if it's a who, let's say you're writing a song about a relationship. Maybe the first verse is all about you or the love interest. Like the singer is talking about a you. If the first verse is about you, then the second verse could be about me. So you're changing the who, and then you could get to the third verse or bridge and make the third verse or the bridge be about us. So you're advancing or you're deepening the who. You could also do it with the when and the where. So one of the things that you can advance is like where it's happening and also when. So is it happening now? Is it past, present, or future? So if you started your song in the past, you can make your second verse in the present, and then your bridge could be like, what does the future look like? Or any order of those. You know, if you started your song in the future being like, what if we did this, or we could be doing this, in your second verse, it would be, we used to do this. And then your third verse or your bridge could be like, well, here's what we're doing now. If that makes sense. And then your where, you could have it about, you know, where is something happening, or where is someone feeling this? Is someone driving in their car? Are they sitting on a beach? Are they, you know, in your first verse, they may be driving, but in the second verse, it may be in a whole other scene. So you can sort of determine where that's happening. So one of the keys in writing a second verse is to really think about where were you in your first verse, and then where can you take it next. One song that I want to play for you, and let me pull it up here, is a song by Steve Seskin, actually. And for those of you who are familiar with Steve Seskin, he's actually going to be doing an all-day songwriting workshop for us on Saturday. You can register up until, I think, noon tomorrow, but Steve is a hit songwriter, and he wrote a song called Use Mine. And let me find it here. And this song, this is a perfect example of how verses can change the meaning of a chorus. And it also shows us how we advance the who, the when, the what, and the where. So pay attention to what the verses are saying, and notice that the chorus says the exact same lyrics in the exact same way, but the meaning means more depending on what the verse does, not what the chorus does. So let's jump here. I'll play it.
I was 8 years old, we were poor as dirt. Mom was pregnant with my sister and Dad was out of work. I wanted a bicycle to ride with my friends, a shiny western flyer in candy apple red. I couldn't understand why that bike never came, but money can't buy what I got in its place. Dad tied wooden blocks to the pedals of his Schwinn, rolled out that clunker and said with a grin, use mine, go ahead, take it. What else is it for? I wish I could do more. Just go slow, you're gonna do fine. This is what life's all about. Use mine. Senior prom, I was scared to death, but I finally called up Julian and she said yes. on top of the world when the big night arrived, till suddenly it dawned on me what I had to drive. My rusty blue Dodge had one orange door, rips in the seats and a hole in the floor. I looked at my dad and his new Mercury, and I couldn't believe it when he tossed me the key. He said, use mine, go ahead, take it. What else is it for? I wish I could do more. Just go slow, you're gonna do fine. This is what life's all about. Use mine. Now I'm sitting here staring at my old man. The doctors don't give him much time. He's trying to stand up, but his strength is all gone. So I say to my hero as I offer my arm, use mine, go ahead, take it. What else is it for? I wish I could do more. Just go slow, you're gonna do fine. This is what life's all about. Use mine. This is what life's all about. Everything comes back around. Use mine.
Isn't that an awesome song? That's like a song that you hear it and it's like, I want to write that. But did you notice in the verses, you know, the first verse started as it was a kid wanting a bike, and his dad, you know, figured out how to let the kid use his bike. So use mine. Time advanced, the people stayed the same, the who stayed the same. It was the dad and the boy, but now all of a sudden it's going to prom and it's a car, it's not a bike. So the what changed and the time changed, right? The where we are in time changed. And then when we got to the bridge, it was like the roles reversed of the who. You know, the boy now was helping the dad, but it wasn't an object, it was an arm, and it was like it was now sort of in the present time. So your where, your when, and your who sort of all advanced. And I think that I've used that song in different workshops because it's such a good example of what that means. And I think as you're writing, that tool of advancing those things, if you need to remind yourself of sort of like what does that look like, I think that's a good way to you know, pull yourself back. So going to the chat room, Paul asked, what do you call a dual rhyme scheme, like where 2 words in 1 line rhyme and 2 words in the second line rhyme? Paul, I think you might be referring to like an internal rhyme where it's a word that rhymes that's not on the like the end of a line. Most of the time we think of rhymes being at the end, but they can also be like sort of mid line too, which I've always heard those called internal lines. And that's kind of fun to do is if you have lines that rhyme that way. Tara says second verse is the worst. Nick, we were talking about the importance of subjectivity in lyrics. What do you mean by that? Oh, excuse me. Nick, what did you mean by the subjectivity? Or maybe not. So as you're thinking about writing, you know, what's really cool about these sort of tips and tools is you can use it sort of in any sort of genre of music as well. So let's look at what the songs we've been talking about, what do they do in their second verses? So let's go back to Adele. So Someone Like You, so we already established sort of what was happening in the first verse. It says, the second verse is, you know how the time flies. Only yesterday was the time of our lives. We were born and raised in a summer haze, bound by the surprise of our glory days. So what they did in this song is they went from talking about sort of what's happening present tense. This is almost like a from the present looking back on the past. And other thing that's interesting is they cut lines from the second verse. So one of the tricks that you can do is if you have a lot of lines in your first verse and you're sort of establishing more, like Tara, I know you said you have 2 verses before a chorus in your song. The next time around, you may not want to have 2 verses. You might just want to have 1 verse before the chorus to kind of lead into that. So if you look at the Cardigan song, Taylor Swift, second verse, it is not quite as concrete language. It's as a friend to all, as a friend to none. Chase 2 girls, lose the one. When you're young, they assume you know nothing. But I knew you playing hide and seek and giving me your weekends. I knew you, your heartbeat on the high line once in 20 lifetimes. So it's a little bit more emotional than her first verse. And that's something that you can get away with as well, is if you establish a lot of your details and a lot of the concrete information in your first verse, you don't have to reestablish that in the second verse. And obviously I just said this, but the second verse can be shorter than the first. So Cardigan shortened the verse from 6 lines to 3, and it leads back to the pre-chorus. And Adele's song did the same thing. You'll see longer first verses because there's more to establish. So we talked about that already. Eleanor Rigby, talking about the who, when, and the where, they advance the who in the verse. So in your first verse, they had Eleanor Rigby being the person. Now in the second verse, it's Father Mackenzie. And he's writing words of a sermon that no one will hear and no one comes near. So again, that second line, longer, fits with the prosody of what that line is saying. We're writing a sermon that no one will hear. Like you can see someone just sort of focused and writing down something. And it says, look at him working, darning his socks in the night when there's nobody there. What does he care? Like, again, somebody going through the motions, and maybe they don't really even know why they're going through it. And then of course, when you get to the chorus, look at all the lonely people. Where do they all come from? I think that's really cool to see that even Lennon and McCartney were advancing the who and the what in those. So now let's talk about verses and melody. I know a lot of people from other workshops have talked about how melody it sort of eludes them. Melody is hard because there's so many different ways that you can do it, and there's so many different ways that you can have melody, but I think there's some trends that happen within melody that you can sort of learn to grasp. And in verse melodies, usually some tips that so to look in the center of the screen first, really the verse melody is usually the lowest pitch range of the song. So usually when you're talking about melody, there's a couple of parts to melody. There's pitch and there's rhythm. So your melody establishes the floor usually of your melodic range within your song. So it's kind of the starting point that everything else builds off of. Also, your verse melody establishes 1 or 2 simple melodic motifs that the rest of your song can either be similar to or different from. So you can either use repetition or you can use contrast. So your verse establishes those motifs, and it gives you a starting point of where you can go next within your song. And your verse melody should contrast from the chorus and also the other sections of the song. And since your melody is many times more conversational, it will probably have more shorter notes because it flows more like someone talking. Because when we talk, it's more of a da 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 short staccato way that we speak. So some tips on verse melody writing. First off, melody is very important. Even your verses should have some sort of memorable, catchy, melodic hook. You know, something that people hold on to. And melodic repetition is your friend. I think a lot of times we make the mistake of trying to vary everything that we do. And we think sometimes that repetition equals not as good. But repetition is how people learn your song. So think about that repetition as being your tool to establish a pattern that you can break later. And I think that's the magic in writing songs is you set an expectation, and then you either give us what we're looking for, or you take that away and give us something completely different to give us, to really make us feel something and keep us emotionally interested in what we're doing. And Andrea Stolpe always says that we're probably not as repetitious as we think we are. So like your songs will feel much more repetitive to you than they do your listener. Now, there is a line. I mean, you can become too repetitive, but most of us probably won't get there. So some other tips and things to keep in mind is you can start with one or two short motifs. So that means whatever in your verse, maybe there's only a couple of different melodies that fit together. Like in Taylor Swift's song, the da 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 da. That's really what her verses are made up of. They're very simple, easy to remember. I mean, even like I'm not the best person to remember melodies like right away, but even that song I can remember pretty quickly. Each verse should also have the same melody or as close to it as possible as the other verses, because what this does is it creates familiarity, and it also tells people what section they're in. So people will subconsciously remember what the first verse sounded like. So when they hear that melody again, they won't consciously think about it, but their subconscious will be like, oh, we're back to a verse. And I think that's something that a lot of songwriters miss, is they vary the verses so much that your listener sort of loses their guidepost on where they are in the song. So using that sort of context, so that tip can help you in that context. And also, you don't have to overcomplicate motifs. You know, the power is really in the simplicity when you're thinking about that. Any questions on motifs and melody and verses like this? Nope. Perfect. So let's start putting this into practice. So let's create sort of a song outline, and let's actually do some. So Anne asked a good question. So how do you start finding a melody? So one of the things that you can do, Anne, is you can look at the rhythm of your line. So like I mentioned, melody is based on pitch and rhythm. So if you look at the rhythm of the language that's in your lyric, you can use that rhythm to establish the rhythmic portion of it, and then start adding tones to it to be the actual pitch, the actual what a lot of people think of as the melody. So what does that mean? So a lot of times, if you have a metronome or something that's giving you a beat or a pulse, and let's say your song is named, let's say the line is Mike Rudquist. So like you would set that line to the rhythm. So it'd be like Mike Rudquist or da, da, da. So then that's half your melody right there. So it's da, 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 da. So what I did was I repeated that rhythm twice, then I varied it, and then I repeated it again. So that's your AABA structure that you can use. And that's a good trick of when you're writing a melody. So what I just did was more rhythmic, but you could then start adding pitches to that to create melody. Other ways to come up with melodies is to play a chord progression and then sing gibberish to it and then put lyrics to it later. So make sure that your melody is strong enough to where that you can remember it and sing it, but then add lyrics to it later. Going back to the chat room. So Anne says, do you typically start with lyrics? Sometimes I wake up with a melody, but no lyric or a word or two. So both ways are correct. There's no right or wrong way to write a song. I find that when I write lyrics first, my melody is not as strong. So I find that I write melody first, and then I put lyric to the melody. And I've been taking this course from Ryan Tedder on a site called Monthly. Ryan Tedder is a hit songwriter that has written for, like, you name it. And he's actually even written with Doyle. What's the melody that goes with the Bike Rod quiz? It's a sad, sad, sad melody. No, I'm teasing Mike. For those of you that don't know Mike, that's one of our members. So, but Ryan Tedder, who's written a lot of hit songs and he's a producer, he will start with a track or just a chord progression, and then he will sing gibberish to it, and then he'll play it back, and then he'll write the lyrics to it. So that's one way that you can do it. But I personally write a lot of melody first, because then I feel like my songs are stronger. And I see that Mike got his guitar to write his title song. So let's start doing, let me share screen and let's do a whiteboard. So let's start talking about how you could start writing. Like, let's say you write lyric first, which is totally fine. So let's think of what our song would be about. So does somebody want to throw out a title or maybe a concept or something, and we can sort of work through this as a group? Anybody? Everybody's shy tonight. So let's do it this way. So there's this website called Songathon, and they have these prompt cards that you can order. They're like $20, and it's a bunch of cards that are like smaller than a deck of playing cards, but you basically shuffle them and you pull like a songwriting prompt from them. So I'm just going to pull a card. Oh, that one doesn't work. So that card I pulled was write a song in a genre you're not familiar with. That's a good prompt, but let's find one that's a topic. So this one is airport. So let's say that you sit down and you're like, I want to write about an airport. Okay. So what are some ideas of what that could be about? Oh, I missed people put it. I missed that people put stuff in the chat room. We can apply what you guys said to the airport topic, I think. So let me put my cards away. So somebody wrote hustle and bustle. Running close to the wind. We also had blizzard. What goes up must come down. There's some good ideas. Miss the plane. Chalk says, tell you no lie. Let's do a couple more. Does anybody have any other thoughts that come to mind when you're thinking about airport? Okay,
Hurry up
running.
and wait.
Okay. It's running to catch the plane. It's going fast now. I can't read them fast enough. Leaving someplace like home. Leaving home. On my way to see you. Way to see you. Falling asleep. Vacation. Whoa, we've got a lot of these. I'll save those in the chat and then we'll pull. So one of the things that you can do is an efficient way to write is sort of this sort of free flow, free writing, free thought process. So now that we have the segment of the airport and a lot of these lines, and I'll leave some in the chat, but we'll use some of them anyway. Let's come up with a rhyme scheme. So anybody, what rhyme scheme should we use?
A-B.
Okay. So sometimes what I will do is if I have my free writing, I'll start to look at what I have here. So I also want to start with like 2 external lines and then end with either 1 or 2 internal lines. So let's look for rhymes in these. So there's plain. I'm looking at some of the other. Seeing if there's any other rhymes here within either at the ends of these or within the in the lines themselves. So let's just start writing. So middle of a blizzard. Running to catch the plane. Now in this rhyme scheme, we have to rhyme with blizzard. That's a fun one. So one of the ways that you can look for rhymes is you can use sites like Rhyme Zone, or there's a new one that I found that is called Double Rhyme. And I think it's double-rhyme.com. Yeah, it's a double rhyme generator. So our song, and hopefully I didn't lose our whiteboard since I stopped, but I'm middle of a blizzard. You can actually type in a full line and it will, oh, it didn't find anything. Interesting. Most lines it finds. Let's just try the word blizzard. So we have wizard, lizard, gizzard, figured, Richard, whispered. Ooh, whispered's a nice word. Injured, inward. Snickered, simmered, whiskered. It shows you a lot of rhymes that are not just in the rhyming dictionary. Did I lose our whiteboard? I think I might have. But the idea of this is to start putting your ideas and your ideas and free writing into some structure. Doyle says pickled gizzard. Sure. Let me see if I can go back to the whiteboard here. We might have, oh, there it is. Okay, cool. So running in the middle of a blizzard, I I will say like, it's gonna let me type. Something inside me whispered. So you could have middle of a blizzard running to catch the plane. Something inside me, not my. Something inside me whispered, I can tell you no lie. So like there's a little bit of a verse. And sometimes when I write, I know what the song is going to be about, but sometimes I just start writing a verse like this where I don't really know what is happening. So it's like middle of a blizzard, running to catch a plane, something inside me whispered, I can tell you no lie. So like, who is saying this? Obviously the singer's saying it, but who are they saying it to if it's I can tell you no lie? So what you want to do is start an outline of your song. So saying like verse 1, it's at the airport, blizzard, like thinking, basically it's like, to me that's is like thinking of someone. So it's like, that's your first verse. And then what could be like, what is this person feeling? Like when you read this verse, what sort of emotion or what sort of idea comes to mind? And anybody can throw out some kind of an idea and we'll try to chase it down. Anxious. Okay. That's a good feeling. So what are some words that fit with anxious? What would be some other words that fit with that? Nervous. Worried is a good word. I like that. So nervous, anxious, worried. Let's say then, as we're writing this song, verse 1 is we're at the airport thinking about the person and we're worried. So worried is kind of like, this is starting to be like chorus material, right? So you're at the airport, you are worried, and you're thinking about the person. That's probably enough for your first verse because that leaves enough information to where there's questions that can be answered in the second verse. So what comes to my mind as I'm thinking about being at the airport, thinking about a person, and really the idea is that I'm worried, is like, why am I worried? Like, why am I at the airport and why am I worried? So your second verse is, why am I at the airport? And what happened to make me worried? Chucks, you said change the you to me. Which you?
I'm sorry, in the second line. In the second one, it says here, I can tell you no lie. What if you change that to, I can tell me no lie?
Oh.
And then it changes the context because that whisper came from within you that you were lying to yourself.
That's cool. Really cool. So I'm going to just write that down. So right there, changing the pronoun changes the point of view, which changes kind of the meaning, and it sort of gives you another idea. So the way I sort of think about this is verse 1, this is what it's setting up. The chorus is really the emotion, the worried part. Verse 2 answers the question of why and what happened to make me worried, or maybe what happened to make me tell myself that I can tell myself no lies. Like what's been making me lie to myself, and maybe the lie is about what I'm worried about. And then like your verse 3, or like usually I write bridges more so than I write verse, like third verses, but then the last part can be like, what am I going to do about it? Or once I fly wherever I'm flying to, you know, like what's going to happen then? So what happens in the future, or where do we go from here? The lie is that I don't love you. Ooh. So maybe what it is you are worried and anxious about coming to tell someone that you've been lying to them and yourself, and you're not really in love. And then that actually like could be the actual chorus, right? You could have the worried part be your pre-chorus, and then your chorus could be, I don't love you. Yep. You're in love, but you said oh, you're lying to yourself that you're saying you're not in love, but you actually are in love. Got it. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can take these things. And I think one of the things we do as songwriters is we start writing and we think we have to write the whole song like line by line and have it like you sit and you wait for ideas to come and you wait for like, okay, what's the next line? What's the next line? And you start to like paint yourself into these weird corners. But how you can start thinking about it is write in outline form, kind of like I'm showing you now, even though you may write this completely different, or like Chuck, your ideas might be different. You can outline it before you even start writing the lyric. So you can know where you're taking it and know what the gist of it is. And then you can figure out, how do I use the lyrics that I write to actually, you know, tell that story and show that emotion. So as we have probably about 20 or 30 minutes left, are there any other questions or challenges that, ooh, I'm Not in Love by 10cc. That's a good song. Are there any questions or challenges that you guys have that you want to discuss, or maybe you have questions about, you know, something that you've written lately that we can go through, or really just talk as a group, or if there's even songs you want to listen to and dissect as a team, we can do that as well. More about bridges. So bridges, and we're actually going to do a whole month workshop on bridges. So I don't want to give away everything tonight, but it doesn't hurt to review information. But bridges are a chance for you to not only sort of summarize or expand on the main idea, but a bridge is usually a chance for you to contrast all of the other sections of the song. So many times, the bridge is going away from what we've already heard to give us a little bit of a break. So it gives us a little bit of a mental vacation or a subconscious vacation from what we have already heard. So then when your chorus comes back, it gives you sort of this more satisfied feeling because now you're back to something familiar. So a bridge is taking you away in order to sort of come back home, if that makes sense. So it's all about a contrasting section and it could be a lot of times, you know, bridges could be even like a guitar solo or like an instrument solo because it's different than the rest of the song. It's contrasting from what you've already done. So a lot of times you might hear an instrumental bridge or a solo, but a lot of times it's completely different chord structure, it's completely different melody, it's completely different, you know, everything is different because you want it to be the most contrasted section of the song. And then Christine says she was told that you have to have verse 2's last line must rhyme with verse 1. Is that true? In songwriting, you don't have to do anything. You don't necessarily have to have the lines rhyme, but a lot of times for familiarity, you should probably stick with the same rhyme scheme. So again, people know that what section they're in. And Paula, that was your question too. So you keep the rhyme scheme the same on each verse. Yes, usually, because that is the structure that you've established. But you don't have to. Mike?
Yeah, Chad, quick question. Can you talk about the difference between perfect and imperfect rhymes?
Yes. So let's talk about rhymes. I'm actually going to find something for us. I'm going to share this again. I'm going to clear. So there's actually, if you read in Pat Patterson's books, he states that there's 5 types of rhyme. So you have perfect rhyme, which is the vowel and consonant sounds are the exact same. So an example would be play, stay, way, hard, card. The vowel and the consonant are exactly the same. So this is what you would call the most stable type of rhyme. And when we're talking about stable and unstable, we're talking about prosody. So one of the things that can actually make songs unbelievable, meaning people don't believe them, they don't feel the emotion of them, is they use all perfect rhymes. If you use all perfect rhymes, unless you're using you can be skilled at perfect rhyme, but if you stick with all perfect rhyme, you are probably writing songs that sound like they're written. And you're probably making people not believe what you're saying because the rhyme is too stable and your topic is unstable. So there's a mismatch between the prosody of what you're saying and what is happening. So that's the most stable. The next type of rhyme is an additive rhyme. So additive means you are adding a sound to a word. So you might have stay and played. So you're adding that D sound on the end of the word. So you've got and actually I'm wrong. So the next type of rhyme is a family rhyme, which family rhymes are the consonants are related. So let's say you have the word cup and cut. The P and the T are both in similar families. And let me show you if I can share. I want to find a family rhyme chart. If it'll let me show this here. So family rhyme, can you see the little window that popped up, or is it only showing the main? I'll do this differently. Hold on. There we go. So see this. So when you're talking about family rhymes, you have 3 different families of consonants. So a family rhyme is you can start to think of rhymes by going into each one of these families. So a family rhyme would be the plosives, which are the B's, the D's, the G's, the P, T, and K, and they're voiced or unvoiced. So what that means is the sound that a B makes, B, actually has sound that comes from your throat. So it's voiced. So like a B or D, G. There's actually something that happens in your throat. Unvoiced is a plosive where it happens on your lips, but not in your throat. So that would be like a P, like the P, or a T, T, or K. Those are just happening in your mouth. They're not voiced in your throat. Fricatives are where you're actually the friction of your lips or your teeth or your tongue cause the sound. So those are like V, Z, F, F, S, Sh, those sounds are caused by friction. So that's your family of fricatives. And then you also have nasals, which are the M's, the N's, and like the NG sound. So when you're talking about a family rhyme, like if you have the word cat and bad are rhymes. They're a family rhyme because they have the same, the consonants fall in the same family. But what about cat and the word path? Those are basically, they're still family rhymes, but they're not quite as much in the same family. So like cat, path, wrath, catch, those words rhyme, but they're in different families. Does that make sense? So family rhyme is the next type of rhyme. Go back to our whiteboard. So we talked about family. Additive rhyme is where you add a sound. So like stay, played. Sometimes it might be like found, or a better example would be town and lounge. That's an additive rhyme because you're adding the NG sound onto that. The next type of rhyme would be subtractive, which is the exact opposite of additive. So that's where you're taking the sound off. So that would be like stain to way. You're losing the N sound on the end. The next type of rhyme would be what we call Assonance Rhyme, if I can spell it right. And what this is the vowel is the same, but the consonant on the end is different. So this is where you get the rhymes that are in different families. So it would be like gone and like gone. Gone's not a good one because the O is. Let's do home and coat. So home and coat is an assonance rhyme because the vowel is the same, but these two, or the consonants, are in different families. So you have the T in the plosives, and then you have the M, which is in the nasals. So it's a type of family rhyme, but it's just the vowels that are matching. And then the last type of rhyme is consonants rhyme, which is the vowels don't match, but the consonant does. So what's an example of that? So that would be like cat and cut. So the vowel is different, but the consonant on the end is the same. And that's the most unstable rhyme, besides you have words that don't rhyme, but the most unstable rhyme is the consonants rhyme. So your spectrum of sort of stability to instability is perfect rhyme to consonants rhyme. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually 6 types of rhyme. Some people put additive and subtractive as one type. So there's 5 or 6 different types. If you want to learn and read more about this, Pat Pattison's book, Writing Better Lyrics, has a lot of this. And then he also has a whole book on rhyme that is very helpful as well. It's all about song structure and rhyme. But Mike, that was a good question. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
Paula had to sign off. Cool. What about using subverses, verses with a different lyric and melodic content from the opening verse? MacArthur Park also using some Gershwin songs. I mean, basically there's no rules. So if it sounds cool, you can do it. I would say that from a commercial music standpoint, listening to stuff that's current, I mean, there's not a lot of that happening unless the second verse is done by like another artist, or maybe it's another like feature. But there are probably songs like MacArthur Park and Gershwin. Those are, I think, from different time periods. So that's the thing. There's trends and there's sort of things that kind of go in and out of style. But definitely, if it works in your song, Paul, you can definitely do that. I find that I write my verses very similar, though. So,
is that something, Chad, that is, yeah, dated, but is it something that is has different terminology than what they used back then? Jimmy Webb used it, I know, like Rosecrans Boulevard.
So maybe we should listen to it and see what it. So what's the name of that song you said?
MacArthur's Park, but also Rosecrans Boulevard, Johnny Rivers, or I think the Fifth Dimension did it. Yeah, it's dated music, but that's why I was wondering if there's a different terminology for that use, if it's even used today in modern music.
I don't know. Let's listen to it and see what is going on and see if I can dissect it a little bit. I'm not familiar with that song. Let me go here.
A lot of musical speed bumps in that one. It's not particularly doesn't grab me more as much as MacArthur's Park, so it might have been a bad example, but you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, definitely, like, it's definitely more of an artsy, like, story song where it's not really a song that, unless you know it, you're probably not going to sing along with it through there because you didn't necessarily know where it was going, right? So there weren't a lot of like guideposts to tell you like what section are you in now? You know, it's like, okay, there was a verse, the second part sounded like a verse, but then it had the title in it, and then there was like kind of a bridgy thing, but then there was like almost like a second chorus, and then it kind of went back to a similar verse. But yeah, I mean, even the Fifth Dimension, that wasn't necessarily, was that a big hit for them? Was that a hit? Or because I don't know if like a song like that would be on the radio that much.
No, Johnny Rivers did it too. I think it was probably one of Jimmy Webb's more mediocre songs. It sounds to me like it was written by maybe too many people. That's the feeling I get from it.
Maybe that could be
very chopped up.
Yeah. What did other people think of that song? I had never heard it before, but I found myself not really knowing where I was in it.
Well, he's written some really, really great songs, and he was a real pioneer, when he was, at it kind of full speed. And I don't know, I think he was just doing something kind of artistic and outside of the box. And I think, it was just sort of like, hey, that's Jimmy Webb, so let's go for it.
Sure.
MacArthur's Park was that same artsy thing, but it was a lot more popular, and it was used that same technique, I think.
Well, MacArthur's Park, that's the Somebody Left the Cake Out in the Rain, right?
Correct.
That song? Yeah. That, that the only part that a lot of people remember, unless they're really listening to it, is the cake in the rain part, right? Like it's a long song, and I think it probably has different sort of verses and stuff, but and that's the thing, like, feel free to experiment with sections and how they're set up. There's no rules in any of this stuff, but I think there are what I would call like commercial standards, or there are commercial trends that people hear as being like the sort of the sound of the time, or things that people equate with a good song. Beth says, same, I felt lost, but then there were longer sections that I wanted to hold on to in order to understand the song. Yeah, I mean, I think overall I kind of knew what the song was about, but I was waiting for it to give me something that I could sort of like hold on to. And maybe that's the idea, is the prosody of the song is that we're not supposed to feel settled in it. So the structure is so unstable that that's what we're supposed to feel. Anne says MacArthur's Park he wrote on the plane on the way to deliver the song. Never thought it would fly, but there you go. Hey, it worked. Anything else that you guys want to talk about? I know a lot of people have dropped off, so we can call it a night too, but definitely appreciate everybody. What is it about leaving a cake out in the rain? That's part of the lyrics on the song. But thank you all for joining. Next month, we're going to talk deeper into choruses. And it will be the second Thursday of the month. I think that might be February 11th, if I remember correctly. So definitely watch the website and emails for that. And thanks for all the new people that joined us. Definitely feel free to check out another meeting if you'd like. And then remember, we do have Steve Seskin, our workshop this Saturday. You can register now through noon tomorrow at mnsongwriters.org. But definitely appreciate all you coming, and everybody have a good night and stay safe.